welcome a great leader, Howard Schultz.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Dean Olian, for that wonderful introduction. I really appreciate that. You gave basically my speech, so I'm going to have to start from scratch. First off, I'm honored and humbled to just be in the same sentence with Coach John Wooden. And when he called and asked me whether or not I wanted to be part of this inaugural award, I was really moved. And to be honest with you, when I think about being on the stage with him tonight, it's tough to think that a kid from Brooklyn, New York, who has built a coffee company is going to be talking about leadership and integrity and ethics and values with John Wooden. So I'm honored to be associated with the coach and obviously with UCLA. I don't want to give a speech. I want to really try and just have a conversation with you about trying to build a different kind of company and really how I see the world in terms of commerce, capitalism, and a social conscience. And when I think back on the last 20, 30 years of the growth and development of Starbucks, it goes back to an initial understanding of the fact that we wanted to build a different type of business. Not better than anyone else, but philosophically very different. And we were criticized for it fairly early on because shareholder value is at stake. So it began with the premise that we wanted to build a business that would balance the fragile issues of making a profit and being a benevolent employer and a benevolent part of the community. In a sense, balancing the fragility of capitalism and a social conscience. And in 1987, when we kind of put that in place, we had 11 stores, 100 employees, and we were a private company that was losing money. We were not venture-backed yet, but we had this dream about not only creating a national brand around coffee, but really, in a sense, building the kind of company that perhaps our parents never got a chance to work for. And that's linked directly to my own background, as the dean had mentioned. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in federally subsidized housing. My dad never made more than $20,000 a year, and I kind of saw firsthand the fracturing of the American dream when there wasn't a lot of resources, not a lot of money, and a lot of issues associated with that. Most specifically, witnessed something when I was a young boy at the age of 7. And you think about the age of 7, can anything happen at 7 years old that's going to shape your entire life? But in my case, it certainly did. I came home from school at 7 years old. My father was spread on a couch with a cast from his hip to his ankle. And what had happened is he was a truck driver, and he had a terrible job. And he had a series of bad blue-collar jobs, but this was one of the worst. He was a delivery driver picking up and delivering cloth diapers before the invention of Pampers. He fell on a sheet of ice in a winter month of March, broke his hip and ankle, and he was in a cast. And in those days, if you were an uneducated blue-collar worker, there was no workman's compensation. You were out of work, and there was not much to go around. And we were kind of left with the plight of a working-class family with not a lot of help. And at the age of 7, I kind of saw what that meant. Now, I never imagined, believe me, that one day I would help build and be part of a company that employed 200,000 people. But it did shape my values and the lens in which I would see the world. And so when we were in a position in 87 to think about building the company, what we wanted to try and do was build a company in which nobody would be left behind, people would be valued, and in a sense, if we want to exceed the expectations of our customers, we first have to exceed the expectations of our own people. We couldn't afford advertising. We didn't have much resources. So the equity of the brand from day one was built on the experience. And that experience came to life every single day in our stores. Now, we never imagined, as I stand here before you, that one day there'd be 16,000 stores, that Starbucks would become this iconic brand. We'd serve 50 million people a week. But if you get underneath all of that, you got to ask yourself, how did it happen and why? And In 1992, when we went public with about 125 stores and 500 employees, there was analyst reports, there was Cynic's editorial that said, Starbucks is not built to last. This is a West Coast phenomenon. No one at the time is going to pay $2, $3 for a cup of coffee. Now it's $4. It wasn't built to travel. And there were reports already about saturation. What people didn't realize is that underneath the growth and development of the company, there was something going on that was quite unique. And candidly, we didn't understand it all that well ourselves at the time. And what was going on is that in addition to the quality of the coffee and the relationship we were building with our customers and our people, we were also building something that really became a major asset to the company, and that was this third place, this place between home and work, and this sense of humanity and sense of community that began to exist in our stores. And if you think about the decade of the 90s and the evolution of technology and how fast things have moved, so many people were spending so much time in front of a screen, in front of a computer, and we were spending less time with one another. Starbucks brought people together, and there was a sense of gathering, a sense of human attachment, and this human interaction really built the brand. In a sense, Starbucks became the quintessential experiential brand that was born in the 90s. But something else also happened, and this has a lot to do with the values of the company. And I want to just stop for a moment and make sure you realize that as I'm sitting here today, we've got lots of challenges in our core business in this moment right now, but in the last 10, 20 years, we've made lots of mistakes. We're not a perfect company, lots of issues, lots of challenges, but I know for a fact that more often than not, we've had our heart in the right place in terms of trying to do the right thing. But what happened along the way is, I think that because we were not advertising and we were building the brand by the experience, there was an emotional attachment that we were building both with our customers and our people based on the equities of the brand. And I think specifically, I want to just introduce perhaps the most important characteristic and enduring quality of a consumer brand, and that is the level of trust and confidence that the consumer and the people who are working for the company have or do not have to the place, the brand, and the product. And I think very specifically, if you look at the last 10 years or so, and I was telling one of my colleagues as we were flying up here today, just in the news today, I heard that the University of Michigan consumer confidence is the lowest it's been in 50 years. The president's approval rating is the lowest of any president in modern time. And I think there's a cloud kind of hanging over us that goes back at least 10 years, maybe to even pre-Enron, about the fact that there has been a fracturing of trust and confidence in a lot of things that Americans once believed in. And it's government, it's political leaders, it's U.S. corporations, it's institutions. On the news this morning, the UN, one of the most trusted forces in the world, UN people in Africa today were accused of taking advantage of young children, abusing them physically. This is the UN. And so, one thing after another has put us in a situation where there was a recent study that strongly suggested the following. And it's a study that went back and established whether or not in 1960 versus today, the trust and confidence of the American consumer was, what was it versus 40 years ago? And the study goes something like this. If you were watching a television commercial 40 years ago, and just pick a company, Procter & Gamble, and you were watching a commercial of Ivory soap, and the unaided awareness of that product, you never heard of it before, but you watched a 30-second commercial, about 90% of the viewing public 40 years ago would believe and trust the message and have an unbiased view of buying the product. That's 40 years ago. 40 years go by, you look at the same commercial, do the same kind of test. Less than 10% of the people who view the commercial believe what you were told were true and have a bias to buy the product. So we've lost an unbelievable amount in this period, and it has a lot to do with the values, the trust, and the fact that more often than not, public institutions, private institutions, public companies have let the American public down. And I think that Starbucks over the last 10, 15 years, especially in the imprinting years of our business, we got the benefit of the doubt that the values of the company, the relationship we had in the community, how we treated our people, was a reason that people came to Starbucks. And I think we became a company that people were proud to support and a cup that they were proud to hold. In 1990 and 1991, Starbucks became the first company in America to offer comprehensive health care to every single employee, including part-time people. In addition to that, we gave equity in the form of stock options to part-time people. We were still a private company when we did that, and we had shareholders who were very, very concerned that we were going to dilute the integrity of shareholder value by providing these benefits. And what we learned over the years is that the high cost of attrition, the hidden cost of training, could really be eradicated if we provide the kind of benefits that people couldn't get anywhere else, and we truly treated people with respect and dignity. Now, in 1996, this kind of going from one year to the next, we opened our first store in Japan. And I should tell you that no one at Starbucks prior to that year had any international experience whatsoever. We didn't know what we were doing. And I know there's a lot of entrepreneurs in this room, and I think sometimes you just intuitively have to believe in your dreams, and you have to really pursue things that you know are going to be right. So what did we do as a young company that was public about 4 years? We went out and we hired a blue-chip consulting firm. Doesn't matter what their name was. And we hired them, and they produced a book this thick with a huge bill, and they presented to our board, and they told us prior to 1996 that if you open in Japan, it'll be a disaster for Starbucks. Why? Well, first off, the cost of real estate in Tokyo is so expensive, and that you're going to have to build really small stores. Starbucks had a non-smoking policy since 1971. Your non-smoking policy will be a death march in Tokyo. And lastly, since 80% of your business is to go, no Japanese consumer of any kind is going to walk in the street with a cup of Starbucks coffee because a Japanese young person would lose face if they eat in the street. So we looked at that report, we paid the bill, and we basically told them to get lost. And the reason is that there are points in the development of a business where you really are tested. And we were tested back then as to whether or not the values, the experience, the relationship we built with our customers was something that could travel overseas. And we learned something really, really important. First off, we opened that store in August of '96. And it was the worst day to open up a coffee store selling hot coffee because the humidity was so bad that when you got out of your hotel room, you needed a shower in about 5 seconds. And as we drove up, let me back up. That night, I got a voicemail saying that CNN was going to cover the opening live. And I was so nervous that we were going to get there and there's going to be a camera crew with about 3 people. And as we're driving up to the store, there's a queue of hundreds of young Japanese people in the Ginza. And I turned to our partner and I asked him if he hired extras. I was so convinced this can't be possible. We don't advertise. How could Starbucks travel halfway around the world in 1996? A young college student, Japanese, is at the front of the line. We cut the red ribbon. He runs to the front of the line. He cannot speak a word of English, not a word. And he says, double tall latte. And we knew then that something was really going on here that we didn't quite understand. Now, as the dean mentioned, we're in 44 countries now. And we learned a lot of interesting things. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all is that people around the world, and it's very interesting to me, is at a time in our lives when there's so much political angst and difficulties around the world, we're involved in a war of all things, is that Starbucks has opened 200 stores in the Gulf. We're all over the world. And you walk into these stores, and if you didn't see people perhaps dressed differently and didn't listen to different language, you would see exactly the same level of experience, almost a mirror image that you see in a Westwood Starbucks store. And what you see is the relevancy of the experience. And what we learned is that whether you're Chinese or from Jordan or Spain or Greece or in Kuwait where we have stores, is that the human condition is the same. We all want the same thing. As employees of a company, you want to be valued and appreciated. As customers of any kind of establishment, you want to be respected and valued, not for the money in your pocket, but for your participation in this experience. And if you do exceed the expectations of your employees, they will exceed the expectations of the customer. And what we've been able to do around the world is build a third place in every one of these countries. And it's quite different in China, where we're pioneering coffee and the coffee experience, to the experience we're having in Paris, where we have 50 stores where coffee has been part of the culture for centuries. But the hidden ingredient of it all is the fact that we have built a brand not based on advertising or promotion, but based on the experience. Now, as the dean mentioned, I came back on January 7th as CEO of Starbucks because of a word that's not used in business, and it's love. I love this company. I love the people. I feel that we were drifting a little bit towards mediocrity and kind of losing our voice, and I needed to come back. And I came back because I didn't want to be a critic from the sidelines. If I was going to be critical and concerned, I had to get back in the game. And the three things that we're doing is that in the 4 or 5 months that I've come back are three specific things. One is reigniting and fixing our U.S. business, which is under tremendous pressure from the economy. The second is reigniting the emotional experience with our customers and our partners in terms of their attachment to our company. And third is making the decision of the long-term investments that we have to make as a company over the long term with regard to innovation. And just speaking about innovation, we convinced ourselves over the last 2 years that a new flavor of Frappuccino was innovation. And that's not innovation. Innovation is really breaking through and doing things that no one has done before. Who would have thought that a coffee company would be in the music business and win 10 Grammy Awards? Who would have thought that Starbucks would be in the financial services business, in which 14% of every transaction is with the Starbucks card? And these are things that we did because we began to believe that the emotional relationship that we could have with our customers was beyond coffee. But it's also important to recognize that as companies get big and successful, and this happened to a degree at Starbucks, people get entitled. And success is not an entitlement. You have to earn it. You have to earn it every day, especially in the retail business. And we got to a point, I believe, in the culture and values of our company where we just believe we're Starbucks. We've had 15, 16 years of public life that has been fairly charmed, and this thing's just going to continue because it always has. Well, that's not the case. And we have to do things today that we haven't done in a long period of time, and it's relentless focus on the customer, putting our feet in the shoes of a customer, innovating like hell. There'll be more innovation that's real innovation over the next 6 to 12 months than we've had in the last 5 years. And I think more than anything else, really trying to be ultra sensitive to the many choices that the customer has, not only on coffee, but in everything. And in terms of the economy, we are in a difficult period right now. I mentioned consumer confidence in the University of Michigan, but it's beyond that. And for a retailer and a company selling a product that is discretionary, we've got a lot of challenges. Let me just share them. First off, here's some data. Mall traffic in America, and we don't have many mall stores, but we have enough, is mall traffic in America is down about 10.5%. And that is a huge number of attrition. The subprime mortgage crisis in America, where it's most difficult in South Florida and pockets of California, 1 out of every 10 homes in America is in foreclosure. I toured South Florida about 3 weeks ago, and I saw things that you just can't see in your home watching TV, and you look at these homes one after another, and they're dark, and it almost looks like a movie lot, and you ask yourself, where have these people gone? But there is tremendous pressure on the consumer, and I think that fiscal 08 for us, which ends at the end of September, And we look at '09 is going to be a very, very tough year. So as a company right now, we are doing things that we've never had to do before. We are slowing growth, closing U.S. stores. And this is a humbling time and a real character test for us, the culture, the values of the company. And one of the things that I think is important is we are being tested and challenged now to ask ourselves, as we take cost out of the business, are we going to take cost out of the business that has been part of the values and guiding principles of the company? As an example, we have a comprehensive relationship with Conservation International, where we're involved with deforestation issues in developing countries where we buy coffee. We are just announced building an agronomy office in Ethiopia and Rwanda, helping the African farmers learn how to build sustainable coffee and enduring practices that are good not only for them, but good for the environment. Our involvement with the Worldwide Relief Organization of Care. And then, again, the things that we want to do for our own employees. And the real challenge today, I think, for us is believing and having faith in the guiding principles of the company and the core values of Starbucks. And what we've decided as a company is that we are not going to dilute the integrity of the things that have been most important for 30 years because we're in a down period. Despite the fact that Wall Street has us under a microscope and looking at us not only quarter to quarter, but shorter than that, to ask very serious questions about the comp store sales of the company, EPS and things of that nature. And we have to take a much longer view and have the courage to do it than the street would like us to do. And the question, I think, for us as a public company is building long-term value at a time when there's such an intense focus from the street on short-term results. So as an example, we did something 2 quarters ago that is almost blasphemy in the retail business of Wall Street public companies, and that is we said we are no longer going to report comp store sales, which is a primary metric of the health and welfare of retail stores. But we're not doing it anymore because we think it is a very bad way or primary way of measuring the health and welfare of a company. And it produces a short-term mentality culturally in the company. And one of the things that we did over the years is feed the revenue of the company by making decisions that I don't think are consistent with the quality of the company, the heritage and the tradition of Starbucks, and the quality of the coffee. As an example, we sell between $35,000 and $50,000 a year of breakfast sandwiches, which many of our customers like. But those breakfast sandwiches dilute the integrity of the aroma and the experience of coffee. So we've taken those things out, or we're taking those things out and replacing it with something else. It may not seem like a big deal, but it is a big deal inside the culture and values of Starbucks because we can't serve two masters. You can't serve the master of the customer and the tradition and heritage of the company while trying to satisfy the short-term mentality of Wall Street. And what we've always tried to do is satisfy the customer, satisfy our people, and as a result of that, long-term value for the shareholder will come. Starbucks went public at a market cap of about $300 million in June 1992. The market cap of the company was north of $30 billion a year and a half ago, and we're down to $13 billion today. And we're down because of the economy, but also because the self-induced issue, I believe, of a lack of focus on the things that are most important, and I think also a sense of entitlement that has seeped into the company that needs to be eradicated. So in many ways, the battle cry in the company today is how do you get this big and stay small? How do you maintain the intimacy with both your customers and your people when there's 200,000 people and 50 million customers, 16,000 stores in 44 countries? And the way you do it is one customer, one partner, one cup of coffee at a time, reducing it to the lowest common denominator and focusing maniacally on the customer experience. So as we sit here today, I think as you look at the growth and development of our company, one of the guiding principles of Starbucks has been this issue around the values of Starbucks, building trust with our people, trust with our customers. And I think as we go forward as a company, the most important thing we can do is link the future of the company with our heritage. Now, it's not good enough just to go back to the future. We need to go back to the future in terms of heritage and tradition and the coffeeness of our stores and link that to relentless innovation. I also think for those students that are going into new jobs post-graduation or starting a company, it's so vitally important to, I think, find the things that you're really passionate about and work for a company or start a company that has the kind of values and guiding principles that you yourself will be proud of, so you can attract and retain the kind of people who will be part of something like that. People want to be part of something larger than themselves. I'm amazed. The average age of Starbucks employees in the field is about 25 years old. I'm constantly having meetings just like this, and people are so concerned about the issues that have nothing to do with profitability. They're concerned about the environment. They're concerned about the social conscience of the company. And companies today who are trying to embrace the CSR messaging of the world, who are being pushed into it for all hosts of reasons, can't stand on a stage with a large check and think that's CSR. That's not CSR. Corporate social responsibility has to be integrated into the management structure of the company and integrated into the boardroom. Not as a theme, not as a program, but an integrated component of the disciplines that make up the structure of management. In addition to that, if I was starting a company today and I was asked, what is the most important position that needs to be hired? I think this will surprise you. It's not manufacturing, it's not marketing, it's not IT, it's none of that. The most important person to hire is the head of human resources. And more often than not, that's the person that gets hired the last. Because you've got to be able to build the kind of organization and attract the kind of people who have like-minded values to your own. And not unlike CSR, the HR component, the HR discipline also needs to be integrated into the management structure of the company and into the boardroom. In addition to that, the needs today of every business in building a diverse workforce, not because it makes for headlines or press, but because you will be a better organization as a result of having people around you who have different life experiences, different skill bases, and have a different lens around the world, is vitally important. As we stand here as a company today, it's interesting to me that the press and some people at Wall Street are kind of counting Starbucks out. There's a little boy inside me that is interesting for me to be the underdog and for our management team to be the underdog, and we're going to prove the world wrong, and we believe strongly that this moment in time for us is going to make us a stronger company, and as we go through this, we will be a stronger organization as a result of it. Let me close with just a very, very brief story that relates to what I think is the responsibility of not only people in this room, but the responsibility of every citizen as it relates to giving back. I was in Israel not too long ago, and I met a rabbi. And the rabbi asked the question. He says, tell me the meaning of the Holocaust. And we're about 10, 15 people in a room, all men, and no one really has the answer, but he calls on somebody and he says something ridiculous, and the rabbi says, I thought you were the smart businessman from America. You don't even have an answer to the Holocaust question. And then he's turning and he's going to ask another question, and thank God he didn't call on me. I'm kind of crawling under the desk, didn't want to be embarrassed. And he says, let me tell you the essence and the power of the human condition and the human spirit. And he tells the following story. And he says, as you know, during the Holocaust, men and women were transported mostly by rail car. And they were in this journey for 8 hours and sometimes over 30. No bathroom, no light, no food, no water. And when they got to these death camps, the rail car was swung open. Men were separated from women were separated from children. And in the cold winter nights, when they arrived at the camp, one person for every 6 was given a blanket. And the person that got the blanket had to decide, what am I going to do with this blanket since 5 other people do not have one? And more often than not, the power of the human spirit, the human condition, the one person with the blanket shared the blanket with 5 other people. But there were also some people who didn't. The rabbi stands up and he says, take your blanket back to America and share it with 5 other people. That was his story. And I encourage you as young people, no matter what you do in life, to remember that there's 5 people out there who have a lot less than you do. And when you are successful, to take your blanket and share it with 5 other people. Thank you very much.
word stands for values-driven leadership, and we saw that very amply evident here. And thank you for that, Howard.
You're welcome.
But since this is being televised or recorded, I don't want to go any further than asking you to put this on.
It's going to cover my mic.
It's okay. We'll figure it out. Here.
She's serious.
I am. We don't want to miss any marketing opportunities here. So, and it fits. We want to take the tag off here. Fortunately, we don't have the price on it. No? And you will be pleased to know that I believe the proceeds are part of the student operation here, so everyone here is benefiting. So if you will, I'm going to ask a few questions and then turn it over to the group. And those of you who are standing in the rafters, please feel free to come on down and grab a seat. You know, you're a legend in terms of the fact that you engender passion in addition to strategic thinking in the company. I'm sure that you've heard of the stories where somebody, where Howard walks into a meeting and people clap. I have to say that hasn't happened to me here. But with this mix of emotion and strategy that you brought back to the company, how do you think about your first 100 days? You talked about the strategic priorities, but what do you think about doing first? How do you transform quickly?
I think what we've tried to do in the initial stage of not only me coming back, but other executives who retired who I asked to come back, was restore a renewed level of focus and energy on the things that matter the most. I think one of the things that Starbucks did really well over a long period of time was laser focus on the things that just mattered most to the customer. And as many successful companies evolve, you start thinking you can be all things to all people, and started eliminating things that weren't relevant, that weren't necessary, and having this laser focus on the things that matter most. The other thing is, culturally, there's been a very strong level and frequent communication from me to 200,000 people around the world about what it is we're trying to do and why, and also a very strong level of honesty and transparency with the challenges we have and the issues that we're facing, and not sugarcoating the fact that we're going to fix this tomorrow or we don't have problems. And I think great leaders sometimes, and I'm not saying I'm a great leader, but I think great leaders sometimes have a tendency not to want to demonstrate vulnerability. And I think sometimes you have to have the self-confidence in your people that they both need and will absorb the information. It will be a benefit to the organization. It's not a weakness of the company or the leaders by sharing the fact that these are the challenges and problems we have. So I think culturally there was a shift of focus, of information, and we started very specifically laying out the goals and the objectives with a new level of accountability about what it is we're trying to do.
You talked about 3 strategic priorities, including reigniting the U.S. business. And of course, the U.S. business is rather competitive. Mm-hmm. I don't want to use the word saturated. We have this other M word coming into the market. How do you grow further the U.S. business? Well,
first off, we don't believe that the market is close to being saturated. So the size of the prize in the U.S. business is mammoth. Despite how much market share Starbucks has in total number of stores, we have less than 8% share of total coffee consumption in the U.S., of all cups. In addition to that, the revenue of our stores, we believe there's lots of things that we can do with incremental categories that support the core mission of the company. July 15th, we're introducing a fantastic new summer beverage in most of our LA stores that we found in Italy this year. And we need to...
Can you tell us about it?
I can't. But the point is that we are not going to accept or embrace the status quo. We will push for reinvention and self-renewal. And we have to focus on Starbucks and the things that we do and not believe in any way the propaganda of press, competition. It's not about them, it's about us.
And so with the McDonald's entry,
Yeah.
how are you going to respond?
Well, I don't think it's about McDonald's. I mean, McDonald's is a fantastic corporation who we have an enormous amount of respect for, but the product that they serve in terms of their core business and their coffee is not the same category of product that we do. So they're going to use price and promotion and a lot of advertising dollars to intercept traffic. We have to be able to secure our business by exceeding our customers' expectations and getting them to come back. But it's not about McDonald's. Just like it's not about USC.
That was running through my mind, yes. Now I just got back from Latin America yesterday, and I was in three major cities, and scratch that, Starbucks is there. It was Santiago, Buenos Aires, and Sao Paulo. And you're obviously expanding globally in some markets, but you're not in Italy.
Right.
How do you choose what to be in and what not to be in?
People are surprised when I tell them the story about how we select markets. So every market we've selected to date has been selected by finding like-minded, valued partners. So in most of the markets that we are in, these are JVs with people who have a competency and experience and understanding of the consumer, the municipalities, the real estate issues that we don't have sitting here in Seattle. But it's always been, if we find a like-minded partner with the kind of values that we have, more often than not, we go to that market. So all the markets we've done sequentially are about that. Interestingly, our great partner in Mexico is our partner in Brazil and Argentina, and he wants to keep expanding with us because we've had a great experience in Mexico. We want to keep expanding with him, not only because of what a great job he has, but Starbucks Mexico was just voted the #1 place to work in the country of Mexico. Starbucks US had nothing to do with that. It's all about him.
But surely there's a partner in Italy. Why
Yeah.
not Italy?
Well, Italy, I think, when we entered in Paris 4.5 years ago, I think that was the market closest in terms of complexity, issues, criticism, everyone lining up to say you're not going to make it there. We now have 50 stores in France, mostly in Paris, doing really well, but we're just not ready for Italy. Italy is going to take, we're going to be under a microscope when we go to Italy. We have to get it right. We've got to find the right partner, and we're just not ready to go there. We will, I would say, 2-3 years out, be in Italy, but not today.
So what I'm pushing at is there something about the characteristics of the customer base, about their expectations, that fits or doesn't fit Starbucks?
In Italy, specifically?
Well, I mean, globally, and
well,
is Italy an indicator of that?
For many years, in the imprinting stage of opening stores outside of the U.S., we thought that we need to design the stores to reflect the local architecture and the community, the way the community is based. And what we found is almost 100% of the time that the design of the stores and the customer experience, that people all over the world did not want a watered-down Starbucks that looked like a Brazil Starbucks. They wanted the Western version, the American version of Starbucks. Now, the flip side of that is that over the last couple of years in Western Europe, because of American foreign policy, we have had some issues that relate to Starbucks being an iconic U.S. brand, and we have to be very sensitive to that. We have been helped by having local partners kind of insulate us from some of that.
Let me switch for just a couple more minutes and talk about the public scrutiny. You talked about Wall Street. Mm-hmm. Put yourself in Jerry Yang's feet. Uh-huh. What advice would you give him?
I'm not going to touch that.
Think about the decision to go public.
I think when you build a company from scratch, it's very different than being the hired CEO. And I know Jerry. I've not talked to him at all about what's going on with him in Microsoft, but I suspect that it's very hard for him to kind of look at this in a way that's not based on the founder, and probably very tough for him to accept the fact that he has to sell to Microsoft, and obviously he and the board made the decision not to, at least at this time. but I'm sure it was a excruciating dialogue, and we probably really don't know the full narrative of what's behind the scenes.
But you went through that. You were a founder. You grew the business.
Yeah, I mean, as a founder, I think one of the reasons I've come back is because when you help build something and you're part of the clay, it's very hard to kind of watch it drift. And I came back because I want to restore the company's halo to where it once was. People said to me it took a lot of courage to come back, and it took no courage at all, because I had no choice. This is something I had to do because I love this place.
Last question before I open it up. You know, Starbucks has gone through a very interesting mix of product creation in addition to the various lines of coffee. How do you decide what fits the Starbucks brand, what doesn't? You talked about getting out of the breakfast business.
Yeah.
Or getting out of the breakfast sandwich business.
Well, I think it's a combination of an intuitive sense that tenured people have around the room who know what would fit and what wouldn't. Research with the customers about the things that we're doing well and things that are not and what they might want from us. A great example of the things we're doing now is one of the areas that we think we have real license to play, where we can make a huge difference, is in health and wellness. Of all the things we've researched over the last 10 years, this category is very, very high on our customers' list, and they give us license to play in it. So that's an area where we're going to attack with a vengeance, and you'll see the beginning of that this summer.
And does that fit naturally?
I think it does fit because it's the
coffee.
lifestyle of our customers. I think it balances out what we do with coffee. I think there's a big opportunity with tea. We own a tea company that we're pretty enthused about. And then we do lots and lots of tests under the radar. We probably do 50 tests every quarter that no one ever sees in 10 to 15 stores. And those tests give us legitimacy, or they tell us things aren't going to work. And then we have what we call a passion panel with our own employees, and we ask them, and they're unbelievably engaged and involved in things that they think we should be doing.
That sounds a lot better than a focus group.
Yeah.
Passion panel. Yeah. Now, I hope some of you recognized your questions here. I was misappropriating from what you all submitted. And now let's just open it up here. And do you mind mentioning your name and what program you're with? Because Howard asked me before about the mix of programs here. Go ahead.
Yes. You have to bring that up.
And the reason I bring it up is that you really are on the cutting edge in terms of having to satisfy multiple stakeholders and speak to long-term value in an era when we've really seen the negative effects of Wall Street's emphasis on short-term earnings targets. How do you communicate to your shareholders that, while you don't have to be Warren Buffett to see that a 50 times PE ratio is not going to work, you can build and maintain value over the long term at a smaller ratio? Mm-hmm. How do you kind of make that argument?
Well, obviously, we're not doing a very good job of it. I think that's a very appropriate question. Being a public company today is very different than it was when we first went public in 1992, for a whole host of reasons. And I think as I said in my remarks, the mentality of most people on Wall Street and the tolerance they have for long-term vision or long-term projections is very, very little. And so what we have to do is treat Wall Street the way we always have, but recognize that their time horizon is different than ours. And I think the worst thing that any public company can do is get into the business of satisfying Wall Street at the expense of what the business is intended to do. And there are times when that'll work for you because you're doing things in which everything is working at once. But there will be times when that will turn upside down and Wall Street will forsake you. And in many ways, I think what we have to recognize now is that we have three primary constituents. our people, our customers, and our shareholders. We cannot create long-term value for the shareholder if we do not create long-term value for our customers and our people. And you can't put the shareholder first. You've got to put them on equal planes. And I think what we've said to our core holders who have been with us a long time, as well as new people who have gotten in because many people have gotten out, is that this is the time where Starbucks is going to have a year of transition, and 09, 10, and 11 will be the years where we restore the halo of the company. And we believe very strongly that you must, in the context of the street today, set expectations in which you are under-promising and over-delivering. That the tolerance level for the companies who miss their numbers is just it's very, very tough. And I think the other thing is that the responsibility of management is to build relationships that are as intimate with the street as they are with your customers and your people, based on the fact that you're going to be authentic, you're going to be truthful, and those relationships are going to be built to last. But you can't today build a long-term public company on the basis of satisfying the street as your primary metric. It's a death lunch. It's very difficult.
Thank you. Microphone here. Down here? Thanks.
Hi, I'm Neil, second-year MBA student here. You indicated that you never could have imagined the company being where it is today when you first started. But say 10, 20 years from now, when it decide specifically what you want to do, what does the company look like, and what metrics are you holding yourself to before you really want to do the company?
Yeah. I don't think I've ever looked out 10, 20 years, to be honest with you. I can't imagine us looking out beyond 3 to 5. And when I think about 5, it seems like a stretch. And I'm not saying that to be arrogant. It's just that the world changes so quickly. We have been for 30 plus years a coffee company, and I believe very strongly that Starbucks Coffee Company will be the name on the door for many, many years to come. But the question is, based on the experience and what we do in our stores, how does that come to life? In addition to that, I think that there's reason to believe that we have such a strong competency in real estate acquisition, real estate design, and retail operations, that's very possible that there'll be other retail formats that will be complementary to what we do, that takes advantage of the infrastructure that we built and the cost structure of the company. I think there'll be multiple levels of distribution outside of our retail stores where we leverage the equity of the Starbucks brand in multiple products. We have a $1 billion business in bottled Frappuccino as an example. We have the #1 market share of especially coffee in grocery stores. What else can we do in those channels, and what else can we do around the world? And then digitally, we have a unique partnership with Apple right now where you can walk into Starbucks with your iPhone. You can digitally get a song immediately. What else can we do to take advantage of the mobile nature of our customers and the fact that young people today, and that's an audience that we have to keep and keep building, do not respond the same way that their parents' generation did to product, services, marketing campaigns. What else can we do around that? And so I think it's still, believe it or not, the early days of the growth and development of the company. But the next 18 months of the year in which we have to restore the foundation so that we can dream those big dreams again.
Thank you. Thanks, Sunil. While we're getting the next person, there's someone way up there. I'll ask another question. The demographics of coffee drinking are kind of interesting. They're stark. They tend to be skewed to the older population and maybe an affordability thing. But talk about that and how you're going to transition to sustain and grow.
Our customer base is 50-50 in terms of gender. It's a wide base of customers from 25 to 49 is our core customer. And more young people are drinking caffeine-related products. I mean, who would have thought that there'd be a $5 billion energy category that comes out of nowhere with the introduction of Red Bull, and now there's Monster and all these other products.
How many drink caffeinated energy drinks? Okay. There's a market.
So we just introduced an energy beverage as an example. I would have never thought that we would be in the energy business, but here we are. And the customer and the consumers drove us into that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Takako. I used to serve double tall latte in Tokyo. I was a barista, and I love Starbucks coffee. And thanks for mentioning the Ginza store in your talk today. But my question was, so you mentioned that you were aware of Starbucks coffee losing sort of the initial concept of that customer experience, walking into the store, the coffee aroma, and I think it has something to do with introducing new espresso dripping machines and pre-ground coffee, and I do feel the difference as a customer now. And how do you have any plans to sort of go back into the original
Right.
route?
Thank you for that question. I think what you're referring to is in around the year 2000, we replaced the manual machines with a semi-automatic machine. That's an interesting story because the primary reason why we did that has really never been told publicly. And that is the people who make our coffee, the baristas, were complaining in a significant number of people about carpal tunnel syndrome and the effect of the high volume of manual coffee drinks being produced at Starbucks. And so we started looking at what can we do to help our people. Then in a blind tasting, no one could taste the difference between the manual machine and the automatic machine, but it did kind of extract the theater and the romance out of the experience. So that, I think, coupled with other things we've done with regard to efficiency, we skewed it too far, and we've got to make sure that balance exists between romance, theater, and people getting their coffee in a speedy fashion. And now we're going back to a new machine that we'll introduce in 2009 that's kind of a hybrid between the two that our customers will like, our people will be fine with. But clearly, I think you've identified something that we went too far, and I think in embracing speed of service, transactions, as opposed to making sure that the romance of the experience was intact. And I think that's been a core problem that we had and that we are addressing. Thank you for the question.
Okay, question here, and then we'll get one more. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Jaime Corredor, alumni 2004. My question is more related to your experience with the consultant in Japan and to probably many other seminars that you had in your experience. What advice would you give to the entrepreneurs in this room to really follow your gut feeling and to disregard whatever opinion you may receive from consultants and many other people on the street?
Yeah.
What is the experience like? What do you recommend?
I'm not big on consultants, but we've had some. So I would put it this way to you, is that there are many people in your life, as well as family, friends, and business colleagues, who are going to try and convince you to take the safe way to your journey, because that's what they know. And they're afraid. They don't want to see you fail. They have your interest at heart. But I believe strongly that you can't let anyone, even your mother and father, tell you that your dreams cannot come true. The odds on me getting here to receive an award with John Wooden it's 1 trillion to 1 against. And I couldn't get into UCLA, even 20 years ago. So I'm here in many ways because I followed my dream, and I had a little bit of luck. And what I say to you is that not only do you need to believe in your dreams, but after you convince yourself that your dreams can come true, dream bigger. And don't let anyone tell you it can't happen.
Do you have a quick question? Promise? Okay.
I've seen you say before.
My name is Roddy Chong. And I've seen you say before to other people, I'm no different than you.
Yes.
Yet we look at you and we keep on thinking that you're something extra special, all that kind of thing. Can you just talk a little more about that and just, it's a huge encouragement, but it doesn't totally translate to me sometimes.
Well, I'm not sure how to take that. Let me build on what I said to him, and that is, when I look at the success of Starbucks, in many ways, we had perfect timing. And so there needs to be a little bit of good fortune and luck attached to your idea, your entrepreneurial, your own sense of things. But I also think I benefited significantly by surrounding myself with people who were smarter than me, who had competencies and experience that I didn't have, and also building the kind of trust and confidence in a small team that allowed us to have complementary skills. And I also think there were so many moments, as I look back on almost 30 years of Starbucks, where the odds were against us, really against us. And we willed it. We just were not going to be denied. We willed it. And sometimes the difference between winning and losing is that small gray line between perseverance and just not being denied. And again, having the good fortune and a little bit of wind at your back. But honestly, I sit here before you humbled by the opportunity to speak to you. And the fact is that I didn't go to business school. I don't have a business degree. I just had a tremendous amount of passion and belief in what we were trying to do. And I do believe that the secret sauce of Starbucks, in addition to the quality of the coffee, has been the culture and values of the company, which enabled us to build a level of an emotional attachment with both our people and our customers that built the brand.
So I'm going to ask the final question about that secret sauce, because a lot of people say that much of that secret sauce is Howard Schultz. And you came back to, in fact, I'm going to use the dramatic word, rescue the company. The problem with your successor is that he or she will be your successor. How do you groom for that future when, in some sense, it didn't work the last time?
Yeah. Well, first off, I've made a long-term commitment to the board, so I'm not going anywhere in a short period of time. And I think that one of the things that we did wrong as a company that was not successful is that we did not have a good succession plan in place that worked. And at the end of the day, I'm responsible for that, no one else. It just did not work, and it wasn't anyone's fault. And at the end of the day, it's me. And I got to ensure the fact that we attract and retain the kind of person or persons that are going to be able to step in here at the appropriate time. I do believe that one of the things that is necessary for Starbucks in the future, that the future CEO of Starbucks, in my view, should come from within the company, that understands the place, the culture, the sensibility of the company and the brand, and it's something that's very difficult to teach to an outsider. That's the story.
Well, thank you to the global.
Thank you.